Hey, I received some really specific bullet points for points I want to talk about for the month of February, and I'm not going to delay. I'm going to share them right away. Um, so I'm going to list these. Again, my name is Christina Luna. I just create videos when I feel called to, and this morning the message was so strong and clear. So the bullet points I have for talking points are that we are experiencing revolutionary shifts in resources to create greater sustainability and alignment eventually. So I'm going to talk about that. Excuse me, woo, clearing out that eddy in my throat. I'm going to talk about how we can release attachment to the way that we experienced a small dream so that we can experience greater abundance. And I know that sounds very like platitudey, but I have some very specific ways that this download has come through, and it's very relevant to what we're experiencing in the month of February. And then I have something about the emancipation from slavery. I literally got the line, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. And I want to talk about how that could be showing up for a lot of mission and purpose-driven leaders, thought leaders, entrepreneurs, people who have been so committed to the mission. There's an extra layer of emancipation that's available to us this month, and ultimately is answering a question. And the question is, what is the role of creator, human, dreamer moving forward? Um, so I will cover all of that. I'm going to talk about the energy of the snake archetype or serpent. And I also want to talk a little bit about the bliss experiment that if you've been listening to my podcast with Nicole Leno on Unshakable with Human Design, she and I have been talking about the progression of a bliss experiment or a bliss experience that I've been studying for a few months now. So the relevance of that is, I think, applicable to any person who's experiencing adverse physical sensations, specifically this week. There's something that the energy is clearing within all of us right now so that we can open up to more of this bliss experience. And so I want to talk a little bit about that as well. In addition to those bullet points, I also am called to move week by week systematically to talk about the different parts of the astrology in February. And I believe I'm going to use that as the structure for this video and allow each of those talking points to file in their appropriate times. So let me just start with today. Today is Wednesday, the new moon in Aquarius, the new Chinese year, the year of the snake. We have just had the Mercury-Pluto conjunction, drawing a line in the sand for our mental understanding of the old world and the new world. So mentally, we understand that the old world has now officially ended, and we are now mentally attuning ourselves to this new world. This week, as we move through it, has this other powerful piece of Uranus beginning to move direct on the 30th and the sun trine Jupiter on the same day. Now, that's all the astrology that's preparing us this week. The energetic of this week, in my research, it's the Six of Swords. And if you remember the Six of Swords in a kind of visual sense, um, traditionally this card would have a mother and a child on a boat, and all of these swords are in the boat, and there's a masculine at the head of the boat that's kind of rowing this boat out of very choppy waters into clearer water. All of this is symbolic. All of this is within ourselves. Essentially, we are using this week to understand the choppy waters that we have allowed our mind to create in the pool of our presence. Our thoughts, our ideas create turbulence in our emotional and energetic bodies. And we've hopefully we're having experiences that maybe increase the choppiness of that water. Maybe you are experiencing an illness right now. Maybe you're experiencing internal doubts about the way you're moving in the world. Maybe some thought that you're having is triggering this emotional turbulence or this energetic shaking. And that shaking hopefully will stir up a sensation that we can track below the conscious, below the surface of this. We can track it down to an inner child within us that made some decisions about life. Those decisions played out and they became things that we proved to ourselves, and those proofs became beliefs that we now see the world as. And I hope that this week is triggering some kind of process where you can actually re-examine the moment that an inner child experienced that, re-examine the story that they told, and reparent yourself to have another story. So, for instance, let's say you're feeling very sick this week. It could be that a previous version of you perceived this illness and made a story about the fact that you just don't have enough energy to do what you want to do. You're too sick to go to the birthday party. You're too sick to go on the field trip. You're not strong enough to play that sport, blah, blah, blah. Some kind of belief about your physical limitation of being in a body. And this is just an example. I'm not saying everyone's experiencing this. I'm just trying to use some kind of tangible story to help you track the energy somewhere in your system. So you can track it all the way back to the kid that made up that story and really felt the consequences of it. It was very real for that child. And then you can reparent the child by saying something like, what if this illness that you're having, or this weakness you're perceiving, or this thing that you're not able to attend, what if none of that was for you? What if there is something that's far more beautiful for you that's going to be available because this creates space in your world for that? What if this illness is finding lower density vibrations within you and helping your body to find it, pull it out, and release it from your energy system? Instead of locking it in place with the belief, you tell a new belief from a like feminine parent perspective, from an unconditionally loving parental perspective. And you overlay that perspective, and it releases some of the fear that's connected to the belief. And because you can release some of that fear, you can actually release yourself to the experience of illness. And that experience lets the energy move so much more quickly because you're not pushing it into submission with your fear, right? What we sometimes when we have fear, it's like we're pushing a beach ball under the surface. We won't let the beach ball out of the water, and we put all of our energy into not letting the worst thing happen, the thing we're most afraid of happening. So we put all of our energy into keeping it down, and wow, it just locks the pattern in place, and we never fully release the beach ball for good. If we just let it go and we let the scariest thing surface, we probably would find that it's just a beach ball. Even if that terrible thing were to happen and everyone saw the beach ball come out from the water, probably the thing that your child self was afraid of happening, it won't actually happen. And especially if you release all the energy that you were using to keep it down, if you release that energy and allow your body to have that energy to heal, the healing would happen so miraculously, so effortlessly. We would immediately start to feel better. And that extra tension that we would put on ourselves would just go away. And probably the actual physical symptoms would subside as well. And so that's just one example. And I hope that the if there was a masculine at the head of this boat, and it was kind of standing in front of all of those swords, bring it into like calmer waters. I hope that that internal masculine perspective of look at where you want to go. And when the car is spinning out, Don't look at where you're afraid the car will spin to. Look at the space in which you want to steer the ship or you want to steer the car so that you can get to where you actually officially want to go. And I hope that we can find that place within ourselves this week and steer ourselves into the clearer perceptual state that calms our nervous system, calms our energy system, remembers that we can trust a divine guiding weaver in this reality. And so not only are we looking at the circumstances here on the ground level, not only are we assuring parts of us that are lurking below the surface, but we're also taking a helicopter perspective to see ultimately where we want to be going and to be directionally in alignment with that, with our perspective. So, all that being said, don't be surprised if there's some, final shakeups this week. And that goes to that first bullet point that I talked about the revolutionary shifts in resources to create greater sustainability. I think this week we may be witnessing in the outer world some changes in the way that resources flow to where it was previously perceived they needed to go. Um, I've had a conversation this morning with someone. I was I'm realizing I have friends that sit at tables that most of us don't even know exist. And I'm so lucky that I get to have conversations with these folks because them sharing what they, you know, the groups that they get to attend, the conversations they get to be a part of, while they share that with me, it helps me to see different levels of this reality from a different vantage point. And so I was let in on some things that are happening on the world level around resources. And it triggered a memory within me about a moment in my life when I left an organization. The resources, the funding that was cut off from something that had sustained my life force for a long period of time. And tangibly, what this means is at a certain point, I got divorced. And in the moment of the divorce, I was faced with an opportunity to either hire attorneys and fight to maintain resources from my ex-husband. And that's a common thing. And it would have made sense if I would have done that. But there was a different part of me that was telling me that if I spent my energy fighting to maintain resources, that I would be using a lot of my bandwidth to receive a resource that was at a frequency that wouldn't actually support where I was going energetically. If I had received resources, I would have maintained a certain comfort zone and I wouldn't have been thrown into the flow of chaos that allows potentialities to come to me that I wasn't expecting. And so instead of fighting, I did not hire an attorney and I left the marriage without the resource. And because I did that, it opened me up to the universe delivering resources and connections to me that I never knew existed. It was an absolute free fall into receiving abundance in from alternate resource sources, right? And so because I was able to trigger that memory, it triggered a few other it triggered a lot more information for me about how that energetic can play out on many different levels. Um, and now I want to go to the next week. I want to go to like the week from the 2nd to the 8th of February. And the energy of that is the Seven of Swords. The Seven of Swords is a moment where we are going to be faced with, hold on, there's one key thing I want to talk about. I want to talk about Saturday. I want to talk about the 1st of February. I believe that, when I say you can look at the circumstance at like face value, at this middle world circumstantial like climate, and how you can dive down and you can look at how the story you're telling about right now originated from a previous part of you that made a belief in a time of trauma or turmoil and then proved it over and over until it became something you deeply believe that's now generating an experience in your life. Okay, that's available this week. But you know how I said that there's a way to kind of step up, step and see the bigger picture, the higher truth. That window of opportunity is happening on the 1st of February. Venus, Neptune, and North Node, they come into an alignment. Venus, the human body, the human receiver, the version of me that I call Christina. She will feel an alignment and an attunement to Neptune, which is my multidimensional self, the self that's been many, many different forms, many, many different identities, many, many different experiences, different types of sentient consciousness. That version of me is coming into alignment with this version of me. And the North Node is yoking them together momentarily so I can understand that the edge of my evolution is understanding both of these and then receiving downloads from both sides of this equation. It's all in Pisces. So I believe that this day could open up. The veil will not only just be open, it will be completely eliminated. The veil will be, it's like the entire warehouse of experience. All of the lights will come on. I think I've shared in videos before about a TED Talk that like blew my mind about a woman who was nearing death. She was so, so, so close to death. Her body was shutting down. I think she was like even in a coma or something. And she had the experience where she realized, her consciousness realized that she is an individual with a flashlight and she's pointing the flashlight on very specific things that were draining her energy and causing her body to die. And in a moment, the all of the lights of the warehouse of experience turned on and she saw everything, all potentialities, all circumstances, every single expression. And the momentary flash of all of that awareness helped her to see how narrow her flashlight of awareness was. And she began to understand that there were so many other things that she could be pointing her flashlight on. And it in fact also increased the scope of how her flashlight broadened. She used to have a very narrow little flashlight that showed her only a very specific bandwidth of information. And this experience opened the bandwidth of her awareness. And she created a TED Talk. And I don't know how I could find that. It was years ago that I watched it, but I'm sharing this with you because I think on the 1st, there's a moment where we're given a permission slip to have all the lights of the warehouse on for a moment. And we, I don't know what kinds of circumstances you'll encounter in your life that will deliver this experience to you. You can just thank the weavers of your life for whatever circumstance brings it. But remember that it's a moment that will be very acute and it's one that we will revisit 2 more times in this year. It's a climate that we'll be in surely until at least the 7th. It's a climate that we'll experience, but Venus will retrograde and cross this path again, and then she'll move direct and cross it again. So we will get an opportunity to really integrate whatever this warehouse of experience happens to be. So I think that that moment will set us up for the Seven of Swords that is happening from the second to the eighth. And during that week, we'll have access to understanding how we've moved from a wounded place in the past. I think we're just going to be able to understand something that we'll be like, oh my gosh, that's so obvious. How did I not understand that before? I can't believe I was telling that story all this time. And the energetic of that week is one where could have you ever had the feeling where you know you want that some kind of change is about to happen? You know it's time to make a change. I have so many different metaphors I can talk about, but I'm going to talk about one specifically. Let's say that you are dissatisfied in your romantic relationship and or you've been dating. Let's say you're on a dating app and you've been dating and you've been going on all these dates. And every time you decide like, nope, not this one, and you want to go to another one and you're making these little lateral shifts, laterally moving from one man to another. Let's say that you've dated someone for a long time. Maybe you have a track record of dating for like 3 months, 6 months, a couple of years, or you change jobs. You're feeling the sensation of changing jobs. You change jobs, like, nope, nope, not this job. And when you make a lateral shift, you keep hoping that the different thing will be a resolution to the problems of the current thing. Like, nope. Okay, I'm not going to do people like that anymore. I'm not going to do jobs like that anymore. So you make these lateral shifts, but the pattern that you experience, no matter how many times you change, the pattern remains the same. So you're laterally shifting the circumstances, but you're in the same vertical bandwidth energetically. So the pattern at that level of bandwidth continues to swirl and swirl and swirl. We're getting that eddy effect, right? The eddy of experience. So what I actually think is happening is that we're all understanding on many, many different levels the way that that eddy keeps showing up. And we're like, oh, I'm feeling a change. I'm definitely feeling like it's time for another change, but I want to change. I want a global change. I don't want to keep shifting laterally. I want a vertical shift. And so, if we would like a vertical shift, I believe that it's being supported by that Venus, Neptune, North Node alignment that we get on the first. That's saying, oh my gosh, your flashlight of awareness was so specifically tuned. It was so specifically looking at this man or this job or whatever. It was looking like so specifically at that one specific circumstance and expecting that thing to be the source of some massive abundance that you're hoping to receive. What if you could actually open the flashlight to see that this one tiny source that you're expecting all of this massive abundance to come through, that is a very narrow perspective on how you can receive that thing. So I've had so many conversations about this lately. Let's pretend that I, as a female, wanted to have a male lover, and I wanted my male lover to be like a god. I wanted him to deliver all the good sky daddy things that I believe the goddess, the sacred feminine, would like to receive. And I'm going to look specifically at this one man, and I'm going to expect him to be a proxy and a channel for all of the abundance of the divine masculine. Now, there are some men that hold a great deal of divine masculine. There are some men that have the aperture so wide that it almost feels exactly like you're being in proximity to the God, right? the divine masculine sky daddy. And kudos to the men who are able to hold such massive amounts of that energy, and they are still mortal men. And they're not designed to be the one source of divine masculine for anyone, themselves included. No person, no human is designed to be a vessel of the entire archetype, the entire divine. We are beautiful, beautiful proxies, beautiful channels, beautiful vessels for the divine. And to put the pressure of having to receive all of it through that one vessel, um, no matter how divine this human person is, it could crack them. And in previous relationships in my life, previous moments in my marriage, for instance, I talked about my divorce in my marriage, in the relationship I previously transitioned last year, that pressure was on. And it created the wound within those mortal men that felt to them like not enough. I'm not enough. It's not enough. It's never enough. It's never enough for this woman. No matter no matter how much I can hold and deliver to her, it's not enough. And in the perspective of the one receiving, I I'm too much. I want too much. I my standards are too much. I've all this too muchness, too muchness, too muchness. There's a wound of needing too much for the receiver and the recipient of the one that's desiring to receive the divine. And so what happens with the wound of too much is we minimize the dream. We make the dream or the ideal smaller so that it's a more tangible and bite-sized quest for the human proxy that we're in relationship with. And so that human feels a little bit better because they can deliver the small dream. And this is somewhat sustainable on a human level. People can sustain relationships in this way for a very long time until they can't. And I believe what's breaking in our consciousness right now is this kind of, that was the South Node in Libra. The South Node in Libra sort of broke the harmony that we were agreeing to. I'm going to agree to have smaller desires, smaller dreams, smaller needs. I'm going to agree to have smaller needs over here so that you can agree to at least approximate being enough for those things. And as long as we keep the equation balanced here, we can kind of keep this relationship together. But what happens when the universe turns the volume up? Turns the volume up on the soul, turns the volume up on the energy, expands the vessel beyond the equal sign of harmony that we were so carefully trying to keep intact. What happens? What happens is the equation breaks. The recipient of the divine is has cosmic discontent, has sacred discontent. And when that sacred discontent comes through, the recipient, the receiver part of us, stops minimizing the dream, starts prioritizing what she needs. I'm saying he and she, but this is very archetypal. This doesn't have to show up in like traditional male-female things, but I'm literally a female that pair bonds with men. And so I'm just using that as a metaphor for right now. So she wants more. She desires more. She she feels worthy to receive more. She breaks the tiny dream agreement. She stops balancing that equation to satisfy the ego. I'm not saying that in a negative way. The ego band-aid that the masculine has on because he has to put it on in order to feel like he's enough for being a proxy for the divine, right? And so everything breaks. It all breaks down. The relationship breaks apart, and something new can flood in. And so let's say that the female now is separate from that one male that she expected all the divine from, and she's alone, and she's like, oh no, now I have to find another man that can be the proxy for the divine that I'm seeking. She's still looking laterally to solve the huge ability for her to receive. And so she's got these high standards that she enters into the dating pool with. She's like, he's got to be, it's like Florence and the Machine. She needs a big God. Like she needs big enough to hold to like deliver the love, right? So this can magnetize a magnificent person toward her that is an approximation that does have a different aperture, that does have the capability to channel the divine through his physical vessel. That could happen. And if she doesn't actually understand what's going on here on an energetic level, she will make him exactly what she's made every single other man that she's been in proximity to, with her expectation that it all come through him. So, what I'm seeing with the nodes, what I'm seeing with the astrology right now, what I'm seeing with this new paradigm of relationship that we have available to us right now is that all of us can begin to understand the lateral energy exchanges that we've put a lot of our investment and security into, that we thought we needed in order to survive, in order to thrive, in order to have our needs met, in order to feel like we're supported in the world. And with Uranus moving direct in Taurus, with the North Node moving to Pisces and the South Node moving to Virgo, we are dismantling the specificity. We're disrupting the earthly attachments that we had to receiving and sending energy through the lateral plane. And as we do that, we are opening up to this massive, massive abundance, massive abundance. Like imagine that I'm here and there's a man here and there's the divine, all that is here. And I used to look laterally for this human person to receive this entire gigantic ocean of energy through him and deliver it all to me. Imagine that that was my expectation. Could you imagine how that could short circuit a human person and also cause that human person to feel inadequate in some way, shape, or form? He maybe would jump through a million hoops to try to be everything that she needed him to be, sacrificing his authenticity, sacrificing his genuine soul, sacrificing everything to try and accomplish the task of delivering the divine masculine to her. So let's imagine he's done that. The more that he's jumped through hoops, the more that he's come out of authenticity, the more that he's closed the aperture of his ability to receive the divine. Because honestly, our ability to receive the divine is an exact relationship to the amount of authenticity and acceptance we have to what we really are, who we really are, what we really feel. Even if that what we really are has a name called Christina, it ultimately, if you connect with Neptune, is so much more than that. And as I connect to the so much more than that, I can even blast through the barriers of the identity of Christina to, to be even greater in alignment, open and willing and receiving of the enormity that is unnameable, right? So let's say that the previous story I'm telling, this person just decides that he's failed. He's failed. He's failed. He's lost himself and he's lost her in the process. So he's all alone. He goes into the tunnel. His ego has died. He, in the tunnel and aloneness, he finds his connection to himself again. He finds his connection to his own mastery, his own divinity. He begins to open up to what he really is. And in that tunnel of aloneness, he trusts himself, he honors himself, he moves from his authentic place because he's not yoked to anyone else's expectations. And that is what connects him to be a greater, have greater aperture and to be a greater vessel or proxy for the divine. So those folks are out there. I recently saw a content creator talk about these phases of masculine development. And he said there's four phases. The first phase is the knight phase, where the knight is like chivalrous and, on a quest and, devoted to, the conquest, right? And then you have the prince phase, and the prince is, feathering the nest, gathering the kit, like collecting the different artifacts that create a full life, including like a wife and a house and the car and the job, right? So that the prince is like collecting a collector, basically. And if you're dating a prince, you may feel that you're kind of like an object that he's collected, that he's like, just stay put, just stay secure. You're a part of me feeling like I'm completing my kit. And usually the prince phase has to fall apart in some ways. And we get to the part where he couldn't provide enough to parts of his kit. And so his kit fell apart because he couldn't be all the things to all the parts of his kit in order for them to all stay. So because he was, yeah, I think you're getting the point here. So he falls then into the tunnel. In the tunnel, he realizes that he's truly lost something that he deeply values, not because it completes him, but because he truly wants to be devoted to that. He truly values that. It's actually part of what makes life worth living is to experience this thing that he's lost. And so he recommits to himself in the tunnel, and then he emerges as a king. And the king understands how to be a vessel for the divine. The king is the willing proxy for the divine. And the strongest connection is to himself as the king in service to the divine so that he may be a proxy for the recipient. All of that, we're only on the second week of freaking February. All of that, that's what happens on the man side. We all have that path inside of us. We all have that same exact path. No matter if you're a male or a female, we have that path. So I think it's important to find out what part of the path we are on. If we're still trying to find a physical man to complete our kit, then we're still in the prince phase of that. The feminine side has a whole different energetic, but the energetic, the energetic is similar. What if we also willingly release our attachment to the lateral world, giving to us in the way that we expect it to, and being dissatisfied or minimizing the dream so that it all fits properly? And what if we start to open up to the way that the divine filters into all of the different aspects of our reality? Every single avenue is trying to give to us. Every single part of us can receive from all of these different avenues. And we may be very particular in how we want some of those parts of the recipe to come in. And we don't need to limit it to just these specific parts being all of it. I can decide that one man is my lover, and I can also allow the divine masculine to provide other things to me through different channels, like sunlight, for instance, like my cat purring on my body, for instance, like the barista asking me about my day, like, someone sharing world news with me. All of these different avenues of receiving from my life fulfill me in certain ways that if I was focused on only one source, I would miss and I wouldn't feel fulfilled by those. And I would be like looking at all of the ways that one area of my life is not delivering to me. And so the week from the 2nd to the 8th opens us up to the vast abundance that is available for us to receive. And it also helps us to understand how we can give in ways that we may not even have thought of is a delivery system for someone else's need to receive. So that was a mouthful. We get to the week from the 9th to the 15th. Oh, so I covered revolutionary shifts in resources. I covered releasing attachment to the way we experience the small dream, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. Okay, that's the week of the 16th through, oh no, that's the 9th through the 15th. Okay, so from the 9th to the 15th, we have the Eight of Swords. The Eight of Swords is going to be an interesting week. We've got the full moon that week. We've got the Sun square Uranus that week. We've got Mercury square Uranus that week. We've got Mars trining Saturn. We've got the Sun and Mercury cazimi. Okay. The archetype, well, the story of the Eight of Swords is a person who has a blindfold on. Her arms are bound. There's swords all around her. She's a slave in her mind. She has given her creatorship. She's given the power of her ability to create with her mind, and she's enslaved herself. And this week, we have an opportunity to ask ourselves, what is the role of the creator, human dreamer? What is my role? What's possible? What can I do with this special gift to create? And the download that came with all of this was it came in through the victim, martyr, perpetrator triad. And I was noticing that even though I do not experience this on like a relational level. Like I used to be a part of this triangle. In the past, when I was married, I believed that I was a victim, my husband was a perpetrator, and the savior was the guiding voices in my head. The guiding voices, my intuition saved me from a victim experience I was having with a man that was perpetrating me, right? We have these triangles show up relationally on many different levels. We could think that we're victims to our landlords, victims to the government, victims to the boss, whatever. We if we're in it in a relational way, we will literally see other people as members of this triad. And I will tell you that if there's any of these triads happening in a relational level, this is the energies of the previous weeks will hopefully help you to expand yourself below the triangle so you can understand how you were hurt in the past. There's a valuing of the victim, especially we can't actually emerge from this triad if we don't actually value the victim. And this was one of my massive challenges in my development because I so rejected the victim archetype. I refused to be seen as a victim. I refused to think that any single part of my life was me being victimized. And because I refused it, I couldn't accept it. I couldn't also have the healthiest boundaries. I was stuck in certain relational eddies that I didn't have enough energy. I didn't have enough valuing of the victim part of this equation in order to emancipate myself from it. And so this is a really challenging one for female entrepreneurs, for powerful, independent women. It's a really challenging archetype to find value in. And I can create an entire, honestly, it's deep shadow work to hunt down the way that you've rejected the victim within you. And that's not where I'm going with this right now. Let's just say that if you find yourself in any of these triangles, you're probably you're probably going to benefit from finding the earliest victimized one and honoring the pain of that victim. And well, there's a body of work here, but that's not the body of work I'm working on right now. The body of work I'm working on right now is actually an octave above this that literally is at the creator level, the blueprint level of all of these experiences. And so let's say that you're not currently in the victim triad on a relational level. However, I want to ask, and this is the one that I recently just discovered within myself. Have you had the experience where you are so devoted to the mission? You're so devoted to the mission. You're so surrendered to the mission that you would give your human preferences as a sacrifice to the mission. And the mission is so powerful that you would go above and beyond your human needs in order to serve the mission. If if you've had that experience on some scale, you may find that you enslaved yourself on some level. Again, as a creator, you still created slavery for yourself. You created a slavery to the mission. And slavery is any time we cannot move authentically and autonomously, authentically, preferentially, humanly, with our most simple human needs and desires intact. Anytime that we've moved that way, we've enslaved ourselves to the next boss level of the victim, martyr, perpetrator triad. I had enslaved myself to the universe, or it was a benevolent, I'm going to tell you like a tiny side note. One time I dated someone who told me I had Stockholm syndrome. And he was referring to a very specific relationship that he believed I was experiencing Stockholm syndrome. And I think Stockholm syndrome is when maybe I have this wrong. I'm pretty sure that the way he was using that label was that I was so traumatized by my slave driver or my captor or my perpetrator that I forgot that they were a perpetrator and I saw them as someone I loved. And I rejected that really strongly. I was like, you're wrong. I'm sorry. I'll go to therapy just in case, but I think you're wrong. I don't think this is true. And the ironic part, so it wasn't true. I did not have Stockholm syndrome in the way that he was suggesting I did. However, I was in some ways having Stockholm syndrome with the universe. I actually experienced that the universe had given me this divine guidance, this spiritual mission that I had devoted myself to, committed myself to. And because I committed myself to that, I had to overcome all of my human preferences and desires. I had to diminish them. I had to victimize myself in a certain way. I had to enslave myself to the mission and do things that pushed me, do things that grew me, get out of my comfort zone, show up, be in some ways out of alignment with what I ultimately wanted to be doing, which usually was like, I'm just so tired. I want to take a nap, but no, I've committed to this thing. So I promise I'll be devoted and I'll show up, right? It was so internally generated by my perception. And it was so intense that at a certain point, I had a codependency that I had to break. I talked in my previous video about how I had to take a break from the work I was doing in the world because I was the boss mission was in some ways I was enslaving myself to it. And I wanted to navigate that energy in my system so completely that there was no part of my life that felt like enslavement. And so this moment of February between the 9th and the 15th, look at every single way you have mental slavery, every single way, and how you give power, how it sort of feels like, the axis between Virgo and Pisces, it actually does kind of lean into the archetype of slavery and enslavement and like commitment to a higher power that we devote ourselves to through discipleship or something like that. Um, so I believe that we have this opportunity now to break the bonds of slavery on a creatorship level, on the blueprint level of experience. And I can tell you, I officially have. There is literally nothing that I feel enslaved to. I could spend a lot of time talking about what that feels like, actually, but that's not what this video is about anyway. Either like there's a lot I could talk about that and how many layers deep that slavery creatorship had me moving through, but I'm not experiencing it now. This video is not a product of that. It frees all of the work you do in the world as soon as you release the yoke of slavery to the mission. And so there's a lot here on, especially with that full moon in Leo. The full moon in Leo is like the only devotion we ought to have is the devotion to the human experience, to remember the human within every single equation. And with this era of Aquarius, which is opposite Leo, it's more important than ever to remember the human part of any fabric that we assimilate ourselves to. So then we get to, I'm running out of time. I got to go pick up my daughter very soon, but I can get this. I can get through this. We get to the week from the 16th to the 22nd. This is the moment where we have the Nine of Swords, and this is the moment where we wake up from the dream. We wake up from the nightmare. This will either be Sometimes we wake up from a nightmare because it's too intense and we make ourselves wake up. Sometimes the real world stimulates us in a way and it shakes us out of a fantasy. I don't know if you're going to experience a beautiful fantasy that gets you get shaken out of it into reality, or if you have a terrible nightmare that you're so relieved to be woken up from because of reality. In any case, the dream will be present and the reality will be present. And both of those are going to, and they're going to break open and in some ways inform each other. We will have a contrast between the two. And I believe we're given this contrast so that we can actually have a firmer grip on what our role as a creator, human, dreamer actually is. And so I believe that we begin to answer that question. What is the role of creator, human, dreamer? We answer that question between the 16th and the 22nd. And then we enter into the very last week of February where we have the 10 of Cups. And I believe that the sun will be in Pisces at this time. Mars will begin moving direct on the 24th. Listen, I think this is a moment where we've finally come to a place of deep, energetic, spiritual, and emotional maturity. We understand how to flow our energy through authentic channels, authentic channels through our voice, authentic channels through our actions, authentic channels that through our choices, through our thoughts and expressions. I believe we're beginning a new era of that during that week. And that will bring us into a March where we get to bring all of that emotional maturity, all of that slow, present experience into a realignment because both Venus and Mercury will retrograde in March. And this is when I want to talk about the snake archetype. We were in an energy of the dragon, and now we're entering into the energy of the snake. And I have devoted years of work into understanding the archetype of the snake and serpent. It's very ancient. There's layers and layers and layers. There's archives of deep time diving that I've done to understand what this snake archetype could truly mean for our lives now. And even though I'm not going to dive into all of that in this moment, I will say that there, for a short time, I even had a snake. I had a snake in my proximity and I held a snake and I sat with the snake to understand more about serpent. And what I found was snakes are, they're so belly to belly, their entire body is connected to whatever they put themselves close to. So whether it's the earth and their belly to belly with the earth or my hand, whatever they're connected to, they're feeling the deep, subtle vibrations of what they're connected to. They're so still and so present. And when they move, it's so deliberate. And they're not making meanings about everything that they're encountering. They're feeling it on a very present and instinctual level. And I feel that this year, if we can embody some of that serpent energy of using the somatic body, using the animal body, using the ability to feel into the subtle vibrations of our life and a message, getting so still and slow with what is, I believe we will be able to move very swiftly and deliberately if we want to, and not move at all. Be very still if we don't need to. And so, this emotional maturity that we get to drink from at the end of this month, it's connected to, the martial art. Sorry, I'm not well versed in the types of martial arts, but the martial art where you have so much confidence and groundedness and stillness in yourself that when you see an opponent coming in with a lot of force, you can simply turn your body and let the momentum of that force defeat itself. You're just able to, like, what is it? Akita? It's some kind of martial art, where you're feeling the subtle tension of everything and you're letting the force of that thing defeat itself or move just straight past you. It doesn't even penetrate you. It doesn't take you off your path. It doesn't move you in any way. You're not flustered. It's similar to the ending scene in Matrix when Neo's like, I don't have to dodge bullets. Like, it's similar to that. That's the level of snake emotional maturity that I believe we're going to be accessing by the end of this month, and that we will need in order to navigate the undisciplined forces that we encounter on this third dimensional plane. We'll have the gravity of understanding how each circumstance came to be, and we will have the levity of seeing how this is energetically aligned or not aligned, and the way we can navigate and maneuver so that this thing doesn't put us into a triad that would enslave us in some way to its frequency. So, um, was there anything else that I have, like a side note here. I have maybe 2 more minutes. I have a side note here that I had jotted down. For those of you that are feeling like your physical body needs extra care, I have a couple of tools that my guides instructed me to begin using at the beginning of this year, religiously. Like, I don't feel an enslavement to it. I feel grateful for these different tools. One of them was, okay, I'm just going to list them here. These sound like Virgo protocol, and they are. Like, my guides speak to me at a kind of Virgo protocol level to help me have a clear and healthy vessel and channel so that I can remain in a grace with the flow of the energy that is being downloaded for all of us right now. And so they told me to buy a red light. I bought a red light. I'm using the red light every single morning and every single evening and every moment in between that I feel like it. And in addition to the red light, I jump on a rebounder. So in the morning, the first thing I do, I turn on my red light and I move my lymphatic system. I put my arms straight up so that it stretches open these lymphatic channels, and I jump on this like mini rebounder. So it pumps the lymph of my legs, it pumps through my arms. I'm breathing, so I'm pumping all the lymphatic through. And so I've experienced not only the receiving through my skin of all of this red light, but also the lymphatic drainage. So I started doing that every single day at the beginning of the year, and I will tell you, I haven't gotten sick. I've felt energetically so clear. I notice it when I don't do it for as long as normal. I do it for at least 15 to 30 minutes. So I also started supplementing my thyroid. My guides suggested that I begin a supplementation protocol. And if anyone's interested in understanding what that is, I can talk to them offline about that. But that was, if you are feeling intuitively like you need to be supplementing some part of you, your guides may be pushing you to do that, and research is key. But I found something that I started using in September, and it's really been helping me a lot. I also have been prioritizing and consuming high quality protein. The protein, every time I start to feel like my body is having a hard time rendering itself, it's like depleted in certain ways. I have a specific type of protein that is not, it doesn't taste great, and it is in a like a powder form. It's called Fortigen. I'm not like an affiliate or anything for this. If you want more information about that, let's talk offline. But every time I'm feeling that way, I really focus on bringing that protein in, and I immediately begin repairing the tissues that are trying to. It's like my body's a 3D printer, and every time I get an upgrade, if I don't have enough of the materials for the 3D printer, I start to feel depleted. And what I need to put in is the raw material so that my body can produce the new tissues that it's trying to produce. And so prioritize the high protein. And then, oh, I have been prioritizing pleasure, prioritizing pleasure in every single way I can. So, prioritizing music that pleases me, touch that pleases me, people that please me, content that pleases me. I'm just like any desire I have for any kind of pleasure, I indulge it, and I indulge it completely unbridled because it's maintaining a frequency of resourceness that I think has sustained a very high level of energy in my system, and that high level of energy has kept me really, really, really clear all month long. So I just wanted to share that protocol because if you're still at the end of this video, if like I'm kind of leaving little like nuggets at the end of these videos now for the true ones that stay all the way. Um, you guys, you true ones, especially the true ones that watched all the way to the end of the last video, You guys are in like a very sacred secret garden of my heart. I'm really grateful for you. You have we had our secret Easter egg, right? And so I know you now. And um that's something that can never be destroyed inside of me. The seeing you, seeing me bond that we have now. Thank you. All right. So I gotta go. I gotta go pick up my daughter. And so I'll see you all next video. I hope that this served you. Bye-bye.